Let's go see what he's doing today.
Curious George visits the dentist. Ouch, said the man with the yellow hat. I've got a bad toothache. I must go and see the dentist. George, come and keep me company. George and his friend got into their little blue car and went to see Dr. Huggins. Dr. Huggins will take you right away, said a woman at the front desk. Just follow the nurse. George, sit in the waiting room and read a book, said the man, and don't get into trouble. A little girl and her mother were also waiting. The little girl looked unhappy. I don't want to go in there, she said. Now, Melissa, said her mother, let Dr. Huggins look at your teeth. She won't hurt you. I don't like those machines in there, she said. They make scary noises. The nurse came back to the waiting room. We're all ready, Mrs. Campbell, she said. Would Melissa like to go in first? Now, dear, said Mrs. Campbell, there's nothing to worry about. I'll go first, and you can wait here with George. So Mrs. Campbell left with the nurse. George picked up a book and started to read. But after a while, he got restless. The nurse had left the door to the examining room slightly open. George sneaked in. The nurse was putting lots of cotton into Mrs. Campbell's mouth. Then she left the room. Mrs. Campbell was sitting on a strange-looking chair. It had levers and knobs and pedals. How did that chair work? George was curious. He went over and pulled one of the levers. The chair started to rise. George pulled another one. The chair went down. He turned a knob, and the chair went backwards. He stepped on a pedal, and the chair turned around. George gave Mrs. Campbell quite a ride, but Mrs. Campbell didn't want her ride. Melissa had come to the door of the examining room to see what was going on. What fun! Melissa began to smile. Just then, the nurse came back. You get away from that chair, George, she shouted. Quickly, she fixed the chair and tried to make Mrs. Campbell comfortable. But Mrs. Campbell was angry. Someone grabbed that monkey, she shouted. He's bothering me. I'll go and get Dr. Huggins in here right away, said the nurse. George was scared and hid behind the chair. What's going on here? Asked the doctor. It's that little monkey down there, said the nurse. Suddenly, somebody laughed out loud. It was Melissa. I think George is so funny, she said. When can I get into that chair? I want to ride too. Dr. Huggins smiled. Mrs. Campbell smiled too. George, she said, you caused a lot of trouble today, but you did stop Melissa from being afraid of the dentist. Just then, the man with the yellow hat came in. Come on, George, he said. I have made an appointment for my next visit. We'll let Dr. Huggins take care of Melissa now. Then George and his friend drove back home in their little blue car.